Great. So I'm here to talk about tokenization. What is it? Why does it matter? And what is its future? So tokenization, or real-world asset tokenization, as we are focused on in Ondo, is the representation of ownership of some asset on a blockchain, ideally a public blockchain, where that asset is not natively on that chain. Tokenization is great because tokens are transferable 24/7, globally accessible, programmable. They have a lot of features that we like. We've seen the value and the appeal of those features in the success of Bitcoin and other digitally native assets. And there is a desire in the marketplace to apply some of these features to traditional assets, particularly traditional financial assets. Historically, the focus, particularly in 2018, 2019, 2020, has been on taking the assets from traditional finance that feel the most broken from a settlement perspective. So private loans, funds, these assets that are illiquid, slow to settle. Syndicated loans take days to weeks to settle, and representing them in token form to try to make them more liquid and quick to settle. There's been a lot of money invested in these attempts, but they've generally not led to a whole lot. At Ondo, the benefit of tokenization that we're focused on is access. And we define access very broadly. So it's not just the ability to hold assets, but also to use them in DeFi wherever you want, and more broadly, to create financial products and services that can be accessed by anyone, anywhere, at any time. We've seen the benefit of this focus on accessibility through stablecoins. Stablecoins are, of course, the tokenized real-world asset that has by far the largest product market fit to date. Over $200 billion circulating on public blockchains, despite the fact that they pay holders no yield. And so at Ondo, we started our journey into tokenization by asking, how can we make stablecoins even better? And the obvious answer is by paying holders the yield from the treasuries that back the stablecoins. So we call these products yield coins, and we launched the first of our yield coins in early 2023, OUSG. It's a permissioned institutional fund that holds short-term treasuries and is transferable 24/7 and programmable, but only between institutions, qualified purchasers specifically, who are onboarded to OUSG. The market reaction to that was really positive, but people wanted something that was more globally accessible to retail investors and that functioned more like a stablecoin as a bearer, quasi-permissionless asset. And so later in 2023, we launched USDY, really the first permissionless yield coin in the marketplace. And then we brought it to Solana shortly after that. And since then, we've worked with a lot of institutional partners and a lot of DeFi protocols, many of which you'll see on this screen, to broaden the utility and distribution of both OUSG and USDY on Solana. To date, we are the largest issuer of real-world assets and tokenized securities on Solana. By count, about 99% of holders of real-world assets, I guess excluding stablecoins, are holding Ondo products, principally USDY. And there's about $250 million worth of those assets today. Just scratching the surface of the addressable market here. Stablecoin market is much, much broader, and even that we see as a floor. So really excited for future growth of tokenized cash on Solana. But what's next? Tokenized cash is really just the beginning. We think the building blocks are in place for the next step in the tokenization journey. And we are really excited about building on the thesis of tokenization, really focusing on accessibility that's worked so well with stablecoins and that we've started to introduce to yield coins. These building blocks here, DeFi primitives, Solana has a robust ecosystem of trading, lending, derivatives protocols, which make tokens really useful. To date, that has been applied mostly to meme coins and DeFi infrastructure coins. And like all of DeFi, it's been a little bit of a sandbox to harden the infrastructure. And now that we have regulatory clarity on the horizon, I think it's time to start reapplying this infrastructure to the broader landscape of traditional financial assets. And so we are launching in the next few months Ondo Global Markets, which is our platform for bringing all public securities, so anything that you can invest in at Robinhood or in Interactive Brokers, on-chain. And you'll be able to buy and sell these tokens much in the same way that you can buy and sell stable coins or yield coins. So these will be bearer assets where you have to KYC and onboard if you want to mint and redeem, but they will be quasi-permissionless outside the US and outside certain jurisdictions in secondary markets. These will continue to double down on our focus on global accessibility. These tokens, really importantly, will be able to be minted and redeemed effectively instantly 24/5. We are leveraging the increasing 24/5 liquidity that's available in traditional financial systems and making that very natively accessible on-chain so that we don't have to, as an ecosystem, go through the very expensive process of trying to recreate all of this liquidity that already exists for these assets in TradFi on-chain, which has been a major hurdle of a lot of the historical attempts in this space. We are bringing sort of cheap or institutional cost margin to these products, so you'll be able to lever them up to pretty high levels, again, while you have access to liquidity and cost of capital that would traditionally be accessible only to institutional prime brokerage clients in the US. And as I touched on earlier, these will be freely transferable, and we're putting a big emphasis on integration in DeFi with leading protocols. So we're really excited to bring this to market. We think 2025 will be the year of tokenization, and we're trying to usher in what we call Wall Street 2.0. I think the Solana community calls it internet capital markets, where the best of DeFi, 24/7 access, transparency, composability, combined with the best of TradFi, institutional grade, investor protections, focus on compliance and high quality assets to build a financial future that is fair, more efficient, and more accessible to all. So stay tuned, coming soon.